The Story Studio is an organization that teaches storytelling in a variety of situations, performance, personal growth, but also in business and corporate settings. And we feel that storytelling has a lot of very interesting applications and uses in the business and story and corporate world. Things like team building or
sales, anytime, pretty much storytelling, anytime you want to establish buy-in with other people and prove that a point that you're trying to make is important or true, storytelling is key.
Or any kind of open communication with clients. But most importantly, what we're talking about today, and I think this is essential at this particular juncture where we're at, is storytelling for building connection with people. Storytelling is an excellent way of sharing common experiences and letting people know that, you know, a little bit about yourself in order to make them feel like they have, you know, some kind of human bond with you in any situation, but also in the world of corporations and in your work life. And I have experienced this myself. I did not come to this, you know, teaching storytelling in a corporate atmosphere. I'm not from the corporate world. I am actually originally a performer. I come from the performance background, a fine arts background. I usually travel around the country and tell stories live on stage. That's what I do. And then one day someone asked me, Kevin Allison, in fact, asked me if I could teach storytelling in a corporate setting. And I had never done it before. And I thought, you know what, I'll give it a shot. And then before I knew it, someone had flown me to Spain to talk to a bunch of executives at a Fortune 500 company. And I'm on this elevator going up in this high rise to talk to these people. And I had no idea what to expect at all. What I did find once I got in the room surprised me a lot. And that was that everyone who was in this world, it was very different from the world I came from. All of these people, they had made the choices they had made in their career and in their lives based on experiences that had taught them what was valuable to them, what was important to them. Formative experiences that informed them about the kind of contribution they wanted to make to their world, to their communities, to their family and colleagues and their friends. And that had taught them what was important to them. You know, and these common experiences, any of those common experiences going back, you know, all the way to, you know, your first walking and talking and interacting with the world, all of those things can be made into stories that can help you to communicate in a human way with the people you encounter in your work life and build connections with those people, which I think is, in our current situation, extraordinarily essential. And there is a science behind this. I'm going to go to Cyndi for that aspect. Oh, you're muted, Cyndi.
The science behind storytelling is really, this is how our brains are wired. We tell stories because we are wired to do so. Ever since before we had, you know, written language of any kind, we were telling stories verbally. And it's how the human brain makes sense of the chaos around us. They've actually found that if you put somebody in an MRI and tell them a story, all parts of the brain will light up. We are drawn to people's stories. We look for patterns to make sense of chaos. We're looking for beginning, middle, and end. We're looking for before, and we're looking for after. And this is why, you know, we often come in business or corporate environments, because if you can share perhaps complex information within a story frame, you help people order what might seem a bit chaotic into something not only can remember, stories are sticky, but they can then take that and repeat it to others because it's ordered within a narrative that they understand. But in regards to stories connecting people, something really exciting happens when somebody tells a story, and that is for both the listener and the storyteller. It's that their brains start aligning. We go on journeys together, highs and lows, you know, the drama of what's going to happen next, and we're in that together. And that creates empathy, that creates connection, and that creates bonds. For the storyteller, there is the sense of satisfaction of being able to be authentic and be themselves and to fully be heard. And for the listener, it is this opportunity to be transported sort of out of your body and into somebody else's shoes and take a moment to look at the world from a different perspective. And that's important because when the story is done, you can get back into yourself and perhaps see things in a brand new way. Or sometimes it's just an issue of being refreshed or being inspired. And that is the magic of storytelling. Before we go any further, I do want to stress the kind of storytelling we're talking about. We have a number of people on this webinar who have taken workshops with us in the past, so they already know what we teach. But for those of you who don't, storytelling is such a buzzword these days. In fact, there's an ad campaign right now for a skin product where the tagline is "Your skin tells a story." I don't quite know what that means. I think I might, but I'm not sure. But the storytelling we're talking about is sort of old-fashioned tales that we tell, experiences that I have witnessed or I have seen or I have been a part of that I think have some wisdom or some importance that I want to then give to someone else in order to prove that a point that I'm making is important or true. Brad?
Yes. And the reason storytelling works as a way of building connection is because everyone, as Cyndi was just talking about there, everyone is coming by their notion of what's important and what's valuable to them. They're all relating that in the same way. They have experiences that show them these things. Storytelling is about taking one of those experiences, lifting it out, and turning it into a narrative that feels like a lived experience for the person you're talking to. And that's what we're going to dig into today. I'm going to give you a real quick overview for what we have planned for the rest of the webinar, just so you know what's going to be going on. Right now, sorry, I'm getting a little message here on this side here. That is, I think we're going to keep both of us on the screen for right now, Kevin. Back to, oh yes, an overview of what we're going to be doing today. What we're going to be doing today is we are going to be talking about storytelling as a way of building connection. One of the first things we're going to do next is we're going to find a story to work with so that we can break that story down into some of its constituent parts and sort of see how a story works. We're going to walk you through some of the essential parts of storytelling. We're going to take you through structure a little bit. We're going to talk about the structure of a story, and then places you might use a story and how you might use a story and the ways you might want to get into telling a story in whatever situation you find yourself in. Mm-hmm. But first of all, the first thing we need is a story to work with. And so we're going to start that off by handing it over to Cyndi, who's going to provide us with that story. So ladies and gentlemen, Cyndi Freeman.
Thank you. So this is, we're talking about how stories build connection. And I think for me, this is one of those key, those key moments in your life where you really realize something is important. For me, this is where I realized the power of how stories really connect each other and connect us with others. Before I taught storytelling for a living, I was a bartender in New York. Job I loved. It was like, being the host of a party every day, and I got to hear great stories, which I love. So it's a Sunday. I'm working at a dive bar called the Patriot in Lower Manhattan. I love dive bars because there tends to be no snobs, and I love no snobs. So this place, our meat and potatoes is construction workers and bikers. It's a Sunday, 11:15 I open. There's a group of bikers waiting to get in. About 6 of them, they get to the corner of the bar. We turn on the game for them, give them PBRs, and my day is off. When the door suddenly opens again, and in walks somebody who I don't expect at this bar. He is very well dressed and very, very put together, very good looking. He's perhaps 60, salt and pepper hair, a suit that's either made for him or tailored for him, silver suit, blue tie, crisp shirt. And you might think maybe he's coming from church, except for he's got a yarmulke. on. Again, not the typical person that you would see here, but I want him to feel welcome. I'm Jewish myself. I figure best way to do that, big smile, big hello. What would you like? And he says he wants a Macallan's. Not what most people order here. This is top shelf. Most people here order PBR, but it's the most expensive drink on the joint. I give it to him. I check in on my bikers, and I come back and I'm like, how's your day? And he asks me if I know where Samson Funeral Parlor is. Now it's all beginning to make sense. And I say, I do know where it is. And I point it out to him and I say, are you going to a funeral? And he sighs and goes, oh, it's such a sad story. One of my best friends, sudden heart attack. He died earlier this week, and today's the funeral. I've been asked to speak. I have no idea what to say. I saw you were open. I figured this is a chance to drink some courage. Now, my heart breaks for him, and I say, I'm so sorry for your loss, and I really don't know what to do for him. So I say, you know what? This drink is on the house. And he's like, no. I said, it's not a good day for you. You know, it's the least I can do is something nice for you. And I walk away wishing I had some wisdom for him. And as I do, I realize perhaps the bikers do. Because what I know, and he doesn't, is that they had a friend die about 6 weeks ago in a biking accident. After the funeral, they had all come to the Patriot to toast him. I walk up to the bikers and I say, you know, explain the situation, and did any of you speak at Jimmy's funeral? And one stands up and pulls back the scratching of the bar stool on the floor, and I'm like, calm down, don't do anything yet, let's not scare him, let me ask. I go back to the gentleman in the suit. Do you want to possibly get some advice? I explain the situation, and he just looks at me. He doesn't even speak. His eyes just go big, and he nods. So I motion for them to come over, and like a gaggle of testosterone, like Vikings, they surround him. What is he drinking? Pour one on us. And I start asking him about his friend. Now, other people are coming in and I have to do my job. But as I walk by, I've got my ears open for what's going on. And I hear them ask, you know, tell us about your friend. And he met him playing racquetball. And he asks about Jimmy, and they talk about Jimmy and his Harley. And then I hear this piece of advice that one of them gives him, a guy with, he's all leather and tattoos. And this guy has a bandana and long blonde hair. And he says, look, you're about to go into a funeral hall, right? Where all of the people there, most of them were stuck with your friend, you know, their family. They were stuck. It doesn't mean they don't love him, but they didn't have a choice. You had a choice, and you chose this guy as a best friend. Well, here's your chance to explain to the people who don't understand why he's worthy of being chosen, his wife, his second cousin, his kids. Why did he deserve the honor of the title of best friend? Not only is this your chance to tell him, this might be your only chance, because some of these people you're probably never going to see again. And I see his eyes light up, and he's drinking it all in, like clearly this is the advice he needs. So he eventually says, well, I got to go. He hands me a wad of cash, buy all of their drinks on me for the rest of the day, and he's gone. 4 hours later, he comes back. And he walks in, he goes, the guy's still here. And I say, no, they left. They left a while ago after the game. And he's like, oh, please, next time you see them, tell them thank you, and tell them they saved my life. And he walked out happy, and I was happy. In fact, I'm still happy, you know. And it was in that situation where I really began to see, you know, it's stories. I've always loved listening to stories, but here something magic happened. He told me his story. I knew the guys at the end story. They came over, they asked him about their story. And through this connection, they had a piece of wisdom for him that he came in thinking he was going to find his solution in a drink. And what he found it was from people from a completely different walk of life. And that is the magic of stories. You never fully know what connection you are going to make and how it might change your life as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Cyndi. Thank you. The thing I love so very much about that story is that it is exactly what we're talking about here today. It is about people making connection across what seems to be a great divide, these from very different backgrounds, very different lifestyles, but by sharing these common experiences that they did not know they had in common, only Cyndi knew that they had that in common, by sharing that, they had the opportunity to make a connection and a bond that really helped this guy. And it's in a very dark time for him when he had to, figure out how to do this very difficult thing and in this very difficult situation. These people from this background that he never would have expected to be interacting with, they suddenly show up and provide him with the wisdom he needs. And they do it by talking about experiences of their own. That's the power of storytelling right there. And the other thing I like about this story is that this does not come from Cindy's life as a storytelling instructor. It is not from that part of her career. This is from a time previous to that career, a totally different time in her life, when she learned something of value that she carried forward with her into a new situation, into a new paradigm as a storytelling instructor. And it was useful and informative there in the work she's doing now and in the connection she needs to make as a professional storytelling instructor. Mm-hmm. And that is really the value of storytelling. Cyndi, do you have anything you want to say about that?
I kind of want to move on from there. It's in regards to storytelling and connecting. It's right now we are disconnected, and I really do think that storytelling can be the remedy, because it's in those stories that we're able to share with each other that that might take a little bit of a place of the warm handshake or the chance to meet somebody in person. And so the question, I guess, right now is, where should we be sharing stories in the business world? And I kind of think it's everywhere. Now, there's a lot of work to do and we're all busy people, but knowing that we're all feeling disconnected, that finding those little places to add some glue to connect us, whether it be at the beginning of a call or the beginning of a meeting, or after giving some dry information, a storyteller story that maybe makes sense of it in more of a human way, or after giving difficult, information, the story that can perhaps encourage people, remind your team, but we are a team of innovators. We are creative thinkers, the stories that remind us who we are, or the stories that perhaps can envision a bright future.
Yeah, I think if everyone you're dealing with right now is dealing with a difficult situation. Yeah. Everyone is contending with circumstance they had never foreseen before.
Some businesses are perhaps thriving. Certainly I imagine Zoom is doing very well, but even the people of Zoom, this is a crisis of abundance. So, whether things are smooth sailing, whether it's more than you're used to, whether it's less than you're used to, we're all dealing with pivoting and disruption right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I also, though, this is all very well and good, and we're definitely going to dig into more about where you can tell a story and how you can use a story. But before we get into that, I want to make sure that we're covering some very practical things today, some things you can walk away with and say, oh, that's a storytelling technique that I can use immediately, just right out of the box. And so we're going to talk about two of those storytelling techniques, two important elements of that, and that is, number one, the essential elements of a story, and then we're going to dig into structure. And for the essential elements of the story, let's go to Cyndi again. Why don't you break down the essential elements, Cyndi?
Well, the essential elements of the story, first and foremost, stories are about people. We care about people more than we care about anything else. We are social beings. So first, you always want to understand that, even if you're talking about technology, especially if you're talking about numbers, those numbers affect people's lives. When you're talking about connection, we're talking about connecting with people. So your story should be populated with people that we can see and perhaps hear bits of dialogue. What do they look like? Second of all, stories have a journey. When you're telling a story, you're taking people on a journey from I used to think one way, then some things happen, and now I think a different way. And it is in that journey, that curiosity of what's going to happen next and where are we going, and the realization. One of the reasons why people love stories so much is they're in our lizard brains, we're always looking for wisdom that we can glean from other people. So when we tell on a journey where lessons are learned and things are discovered, there's a satisfaction when you go, that's something that I should know, or that's something I can put in my pocket, or very often that's a story I need to share with such and such or so and so because they need to hear that message. Which brings us to the final point of stories, especially in business, have a clear message or moral of the story. We call it the controlling idea. And that is, why are we telling this story in the first place? What is the message that I'm trying to make? And for mine, we're having a talk about storytelling and how it bonds people together. So my message on my story was, you never know who you're going to bond with over stories, which fits completely in with our message for today. And so I think one of the things that, have in the back of your mind, as you move forward with, sharing stories is, what are the messages you need to be sharing right now? Whether it is encouraging people, whether it is reminding people who they are. I'm, going over some things I've already said, but with the key messages you need to deliver, start thinking about what are the stories that I might have from my life that would back that message up in a powerful way, and start just collecting them. So when you're having meetings or conversations and that message comes up again, you're ready to deliver it with a story that would add extra stickiness and power.
Yes. And right now we're going to get into story structure. And the reason I wanted to get into story structure today is because we're talking about moments that had an impact on you, moments that changed how you thought about your life or your world in ways big and small. Cindy's story, she did not immediately leave that bar and go out and become a storytelling instructor. And here she is today. That was with her for a while. She saved that moment. It resonated for her, and she brought it forward in her life and in her work later on when she went to teach storytelling. But in order for people to understand what kind of impact things have had on you, it's important to give them context, to let them know where you were in your life and what your normal was, so that when you come to that moment of change, they will understand what's being changed. And why is that change important? And why is that change in some way unprecedented for you? And then going beyond that, what is the new normal? You were this way, this thing happened, and now you are this way. And to make that easy to follow, to make that accessible for the listener, the Story Studio teaches a 5-point story structure. There are other story structures out there, but this one we find is the most accessible and the most easy to employ, right? So we're going to dig into that story structure now. And the 5 points are as follows. The setup, the inciting incident, the rising action, the main event, and the resolution. And we're going to use Cindy's story to break down these parts, all right? So Cindy's story. In the setup is kind of your movie trailer moment, sort of in a world where it is presenting us with normal. Who are you and what is the situation when we enter the story? So, Cindy, what is your setup as we enter the story? What's your normal?
My normal is I'm a bartender. I love my job. It's like host of a party. I love hearing great stories from the people I wait on. I work at a bar where our regular customers tend to be construction workers and bikers.
Great.
And it's a Sunday.
It's a Sunday. And then there's an inciting incident. The inciting incident is the thing that sets the dominoes falling. It is the first thing that changes normal, that alters normal in some way. So it's a series of events in motion, and eventually we'll come to a main event in which you will have to act in some way, make a decision, make a choice. You will have to change in some way. You'll get what you want, or you won't get what you want, or you'll have to change what you want, or you'll have to take some kind of action. But the first thing that gets us towards that build is the inciting incident. So, Cindy, what was your inciting incident in your story?
Yeah, think of it as like a match being lit to a candle. And for me, it was this gentleman walked in who one thing was not like the others. He didn't seem to belong there. A couple of questions, I find out that he's about to go to a funeral. And all I want to do is help the guy.
Right. And this moves us on to the rising action. The rising action is the dominoes that are falling from the inciting incident, right? So what was set in motion for you as after you found out about this guy's situation?
I wanted to help him and I didn't know how, but I'm on the journey because the journey is, can I, will I, how do I help this guy? First thing I try is I give him a free drink. You know, it's what I know I can do. And then I sit there forlorn, I don't have the wisdom. And then I discover looking at the bikers, wait a minute, they might have the wisdom. I check with them, then I have to negotiate back and forth. Do you want to talk to them? Do you want to talk? Can I get these people from different worlds together? And then I do, and they start talking, and it looks like they're getting along very well.
Great. And this brings us to the main event. The main event is that moment of change. What has happened that is now going to alter normal and bring us to a point where we're discovering something has changed, we're learning some kind of wisdom about the world, we're getting what we want, we're not getting what we want, but something is happening. And so for you, Cyndi, what was that main event?
The main event was when they gave him, the gentleman with the long hair gave him the advice about, you know, explain to his family why he was worthy of the title of best friend. And I could see his eyes light up, like I could see him drinking this in. And it was kind of obvious just by looking at him, this was the nugget of wisdom that he needed.
Great. And then we come to the resolution. The resolution describes how is the world different now? The resolution sort of speaks directly to the normal you presented in the setup, right? So now with the resolution, you have gone on this journey, you have had this encounter with these bikers and this gentleman, you have made this connection through the stories they were telling one another. And what is the resolution of your story for you? What changed for you?
Yeah, and it's, you know, there's different resolutions depending on whose perspective. I mean, certainly for the gentleman who had to speak at the funeral, this was life-changing and really, truly high stakes for him. So he comes back, he says, thank you. Clearly, he got what he needed. But this is a personal story from my perspective. I am your narrator. And for me, what I learned was the power of the narrative, that I liked stories at the beginning, but by the end of it, I understood that stories are the things that can inspire, that can connect, and that can solve problems. If we share stories with each other, problems can be solved.
Great.
I'm actually going to share my screen for just a second so that we can see what this looks like. Hold on.
Yeah, we actually, the story sheet, we have a handy dandy story map. We're going to share that with you now. This is the story map. There is a worksheet version. There's also this pyramid version. The pyramid version, you can see how it sort of is structured with the setup, and then you come to the inciting incident. And the rising
action is sort of, it's where the, you know, there's a struggle where you're trying, it's like going uphill, which brings us to the main event, which brings us to the resolution. So, you know, the way to work this, you know, either whether you're building a story and putting it in your back pocket so that you are prepared for a meeting, or, you know, sales meetings especially. I do a lot of sales meetings and I have, I think, 6 stories in my back pocket should certain questions come up. But often you're talking to someone and you're like, I think I have something for them. And to quickly, if you get used to this rhythm and this pattern, it's to quickly go, great, I have a nugget, I have something, I have an event. Well, who was I at the beginning? How did I change? And then it's just like, you know, once upon a time, this is what was going on. This thing launched me into a journey where I was hoping for some outcome. I got that outcome. I didn't get that outcome. I changed my mind about that outcome. That's the main event, which brings us to the resolution, which is the normal. And all of this is based in a moral, a controlling idea. What is the message? What is the key message that I'm trying to share?
Yeah.
And when we say thank you for joining us, we'll send everybody a story map, which will include this little diagram.
Right. And the magic about this is it makes something memorable. It gives the story you're telling impact. It gives this bit of information. Mm-hmm. Cyndi can easily go out and say to somebody, I think that stories are a way to build connection between disparate groups.
Mm-hmm. I could say, yeah, and stories cross divides.
Right, and now you have that bit of information, and it is something you will remember about Cyndi. You might remember about Cyndi. It's hard to say. You're not sure how it relates to, if it's something that you think is important, it's just kind of a thing that she said. Mm-hmm. She tells you this story. She lays this out for you when she has actually seen that happen. a story, make a connection with somebody else, and suddenly you have some insight into who Cyndi is, Cyndi's background, why this is important to Cyndi, why this had impact for her, and why she thinks that storytelling is so essential. And you're walking away with this image in your head, this narrative that now has made all of that come alive and feel like a lived experience for you as well. And you can tell other people about that.
Mm.
Um, Speaking of telling a story and where you might want to tell a story, we hit on this a little bit beforehand, but I want to circle back around to it because it is important. How to use stories in your work environment and when you want to tell a story and with whom.
Yeah.
So,
So,
the first thing that comes to mind for me, I think the one that we often get called in for, I think it's important, is team building.
Mm.
You know, talking to your team, especially if you are a senior member of the team, if maybe you're the person who is in charge and you have people under you. In a time like this, you may have people younger than you on your team who are encountering this kind of disruption for the first time ever. If you have lived through some other situation where the country or your business was disrupted in some way that you had to contend with, if you can form a story around your experience of contending with that sort of disruption, that can be a great comfort and a great inspiration to those people.
Yeah, an example of that right now, I don't know if all of you have seen it, but I know it's showing in Brooklyn. There's a Facebook ad where it's a message to expectant mothers everywhere, and it's an older woman who was born in 1918 during the pandemic, and she says, I was born in a pandemic. She tells a bit of a story about her mom and how they struggled, but how they came out at the other side, and then reminds everybody, we got through it, many people got through it, and you will too. It's a great example of somebody who's been through it and is doing fine. It's very comforting, I know, for me to listen to, even though I'm not an expectant mother. And I imagine to the audience that it's geared towards, it's incredibly, inspiring.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about the people that we've worked with in corporate workshops over the past couple of years, and what their experience of all of this must be. And we work with a lot of compliance firms, accounting firms, and that kind of stuff. People who their entire job is troubleshooting for clients who are up against unforeseen circumstances. And now I would guess all of their clients are up against unforeseen circumstances. We work with a lot of tech companies who are their entire job, their entire industry is about coming up with solutions. Right. And now everyone's got very specific problems that need solutions. And if you can talk to those people, you can talk to those clients and tell them, let them understand how you approach problem solving by speaking about past experiences where you've had to do that. It'll make them feel more comfortable with what you're gonna do for them and how you're gonna help them. And because at the end of the day, everyone you're dealing with, we put people in these categories where they're colleagues or they're friends or they are clients or whatever else, but all of those people are people. They're people facing difficult circumstances, and they need to know that the people they're dealing with can help them and can be there with them in this difficult circumstance in some kind of way.
Right. There's also, the stories that to refresh, which would be, reminding us who we are, so it could be a team building question about a success in a past or a problem that you solved in the past, because this is temporary. I mean, it's big, so it's overwhelming, but this will pass. This is not who we always are, and this is not who we will always be. And having those stories that, can remind us who we are as a team can be, really great at setting a right. We are innovators, or we're creative thinkers, or we're problem solvers. I know that we had a meeting with the Story Studio, and the question was asked, what is something positive that has come out? And if you can't think of something positive, what is something positive that you hope will come out? And the stories that came out of that were just, again, it's a refresher. It's like, yeah, it's not all bad. There's some good stuff here, and I'm curious, feel free to chime in the chat box in regards to the kinds of stories you might the messages you need to share, or the kind of stories you think that you might have to share yourselves.
Yeah, I think that another thing that comes up
Mm-hmm.
often enough is people often, and you brought this up because it came up with a client of yours very recently, and this the notion of how do you introduce a story? How do you get into telling a story? You have a story you think is relevant to a situation that you want to get out there and use as a way of connecting with somebody, but like, how do you work it in naturally and organically?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And I think that the key is simply, it can be as simple as, let me give you as an example, or let me tell you how I discovered that, or before we start digging into it, I want to share with you something that happened with me the other day, or something that happened to me when I was younger. At my first job, it's sort of like allowing people. It's like, I'm going to tell you a story, and there is that sort of sense, almost like that childlike wonder of, I get to sit back and be transported. There's a lot of things to do. Again, we're very busy, and I feel I'm repeating myself here. So, you can't tell story after story after story unless you're doing a team building event where that is the goal, is that everybody is going to share a story. But, just finding these little places, and being very clear, I'm going to start this with a story, or I want to end this with a story. And Brad, I know that you said something about not being too clever earlier today, which I liked. So.
oh yeah, well, I think a lot of times what gets people feeling awkward about this kind of thing is they're trying to sort of find a way to kind of sneak something in there, or it's a matter of trying to be too clever by half. Don't. Uh, what makes people nervous is when they don't feel like there's transparency. These days, we have so many things coming at our face all the time. So many forms of communication, so many forms of media, so many ways people are trying to communicate with us. And we're trying to sort through them and figure out what is real, what is true, what is a manipulation, what can I trust, what's happening. If you want to be a breath of fresh air to the people you're talking with, tell them what you're going to do and why. Uh, Everybody needs that right now. And if you have a story you think is going to fit, you just say to those people, you know what we're talking about right now, I've got a story that I think is relevant, and I want to tell it to you right now.
Yeah.
It's what you're going to do and why you're going to do it. And those people will relax and say, great, let's hear a story. Because, and it's an extraordinarily natural thing.
Mm.
Tell me a story,
Mm-hmm.
or is probably the third phrase every human being learns. Tell me a story.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to hear a story? Can I tell you a story? Like, these are the things that we say at every stage in our lives. So there's no reason that they can't also fit into your professional life.
Yeah. There's a couple other things we're going to do, but before then, I am curious. Yeah, I'm seeing some people say some things on the side. Angela is working on a story about her dog to help her deal with the grief of her passing. I'm so sorry to hear that. That's a difficult thing, especially in the midst of a difficult thing. That's cool. And I think that, I'm curious about questions, like what questions you guys might have.
I am going to ask you guys to put the questions in the chat function. Some of you have already put a couple of questions in the Q&A function. I find the Q&A function a little clunky because it's just, I have to sort of look at the screen in a weird and sort of artificial way that's going to make all that's going to be kind of hard to interact naturally with you guys, and I want to be able to talk to you. But
I'm taking Ryan, I'm taking your question and I'm putting it in the all panelists.
Are you going to put it up there? Yeah. And also I want everyone else to be able to see the questions that are being asked as well. So will there be a recap sent out afterwards?
Mm-hmm. Yep, there'll be a recap, and we're going to be sending you a story map.
All right, let's get back to this question that Ryan asked here. Is there a way to frame referrals and references for your business into a story from their perspective? Would that be useful?
Mm-hmm. So Ryan, let me see if I understand this straight. You are trying to get references from other people and you want them to frame it as a story. Is that correct? Or is it that you are going to give references for people and you want to frame those as a story? Either way, yes, of course you can do that. An anecdote, I know that one of the stories that I often tell again in sales is a bit of a reference, but it's that somebody walked me through, you guys came in, it was a great success. And then we led a meeting, and everybody who led a piece of that meeting told a story based on what they learned. And at the end of that meeting, we heard from all of the people at the meeting that not only were the stories the most powerful part, but they made $900,000 at the end of that meeting. And the CEO came up to her and said, "What happens in that storytelling workshop? we need to do this at scale. Like I spend a few $1,000s to bring them in, and I make $900,000 on the flip side." So, that's a story that could be written into a referral for us from their perspective. And if it's finding these anecdotes, and it's thinking of the frame as you build it. There was a pain point, and this was my pain point. And then I worked with this person, I was consulted with this person, I teamed up with this company, whatever that is, and that pain point changed or hopefully was resolved. So it's about what was the issue, how was it solved, where were we at the beginning, and clearly where we are at the end. And that contrast is key to really see the value, especially in a reference or referral.
And as when it comes to getting someone who you want to give you a reference and you want them to do it in a narrative way, part of that is about mirroring. If you can get on the phone with them and say, this is what I understand of the interaction we had. If you have a particular situation where, something happened between you and that client where they had a great experience, sort of presenting it to them, sort of mirroring it back to them. As I understand this story, I came in, this happened, you had this success, and now things are like this. Would you say that's right? And they'll say, yes, like that's exactly the way I would think of it. And that will sort of help them get on the same page. They're telling the story that you two have agreed upon, that you are, that's a relationship. Relationships are if life is the stories we tell, relationships are the stories we agree upon.
Yeah. Sandy had a really great question. Again, I put it into the chat function so we could all see it. How do you ensure to an audience that I am okay when I share an emotional, vulnerable story? Is there trigger words to be aware of? And she also says, thanks, great info. Thank you for saying that. That is a really great question. The difference between telling a story in a business setting versus telling a story on the stage is in the stage, you want them biting their nails and on the edge of their seat and like, what's going to happen? Not so much in a business meeting. So there is a gentleman that we worked on recently, and his story was about, his mother had an aneurysm and almost passed, and he grew up very quickly. But he kind of starts it saying, I'm going to go into a story that's very personal. I want to promise you, it's about my mom. She's okay. She's with us now. But there was a point that we were really nervous, so that they can go into the story without ever worrying about him as a human being or what happened to that family. So if you're on stage, you probably don't want to do that. You really want the full catharsis. If you're in a business setting, you don't want people distracted by worrying about you or worrying about your family or worrying about children. You want them focused on the message. In the end, his message was, I always think that business is personal. And it's because of some things that he witnessed there that felt a little impersonal. So, he didn't want us worried about his mom. What he wanted us focused on the story. Also, with highly personal stories, really you want to know your audience. Is this the right audience to open up about certain things? Now, granted, if you are in a medical profession, letting people know I've been through things that are similar to yours might be exactly the bedside manner that somebody needs. But then for somebody else, it might be, why is this person telling me all about their personal life? I'm not supposed to know that. So it's like, you really got to have, with the personal stories that are really about difficult things, you need to really have a sense of where the people are at, and is this the right story for right now?
Yeah, it's about, again, judging your audience, knowing who you're talking to, making sure they're right audience for that kind of story. And also, once again, especially in a business setting, just saying what you need people to know. If you need people to know that you're all right, say I'm all right.
Yeah.
You know,
I
this
also,
is the
Brad, I
tough
remember
time.
there was a time that the perfect example you had was about somebody who passed away, and you warned them ahead of time. Do you mind if I tell you a very personal story about my family, because I think it's going to answer this? And the person said, yeah, I'm fine. You know, it might be checking in.
Right. Again, it goes back to tell someone what you're going to do and why you're going to do it.
Yeah. And feel free to ask for permission. Say,
Yeah.
you know, because the last thing you want to do is talk about a medical diagnosis to someone whose, you know, partner is dealing with that same diagnosis. You know, it can trigger things, but you can say, I have an example for you. It does have to do with some medical issues. Just making sure that that's okay. I just think there's a real nugget of wisdom here I want to share with you, and feel free to say no.
Yep. Let's see here. Any more questions? Kate Rutter asks, would you tell us some tricks of the trade in teaching storytelling? I'm sure modeling lots of stories, but what else? Tricks of the trade. That's an interesting question.
Tricks of the trade in teaching storytelling.
I can give away one of my favorite exercises.
Sure, go for it.
It's an exercise I really, really like, and I think is because one of the aspects of storytelling is all about sense memory and learning to use sensory information and to describe things and make things vivid. Cyndi did it a lot in the story, you know, talking about the guy coming in the silver suit and how dapper he looked and like looking like the dad of the bar mitzvah boy, and you know, and then comparing that to the bikers and like the guy with the bandana around his face, like a Viking with the long hair and that sort of thing. And one of the ways that when I'm teaching a workshop is I'll have people describe a room, usually from their childhood or from some formative experience, not the experience itself, not like what actually any of the actual things that might be in place in the room, but just describe the room using all of their senses. And it's a way of getting people used to looking back and thinking about something. We often think in visual terms, but we're actually experiencing things with all of our senses, and it kind of gets them to look back on a moment and kind of think about, you know, how they actually experience a space or a time or a situation and how it registers on all of the senses. So I will give that exercise away. How's that?
I would say also, if you want to contact us, we do train the trainers. That is something that we do. Also, I would say, you know, being a good instructor is about listening. You know, it's not about telling people this is what your story should be. I've certainly had instructors of my own who sort of lead me down a path, but that's not my authentic voice. So it's all about, it's like a therapist, you know. The difference between therapy and storytelling is therapy is about exploring things where you don't know how you feel. Storytelling is about taking things where you already know how you feel and you know, sort of taking the nugget and the wisdom out of it and really creating it into a powerful either performance or teaching tool.
Into something for someone else.
Listening, yes, yeah. There's another one here, and then I want to make sure there's time for you, Brad, to tell a story. So hold on.
I don't think. Okay.
You don't think we're gonna have time?
More important than me telling a story.
Wait a minute. Dave Piercy says, I'm wondering if the experience in the past couple of months makes people more vulnerable and wanting to share more. 100%. I am seeing that across the board. Almost every meeting I am starting is starting with that, hey, how are you doing? And people sharing, you know, I feel like I am getting to know people that I've known for years better now. Because people want to tell me about, you know, what they saw outside or the conversation they have with their neighbor or how their dog is like so happy that everybody in the family is always around and the pack's always there. You know, I'm finding out all these fabulous details. But this is part of us feeling disconnected and wanting to bond, which is why we wanted this to be the first subject of one of our free webinars.
Yeah, we're be doing more of these webinars going forward. We thought this is a great place to start because of the current situation. Because so much what we're going through right now is needing to connect with people, needing to feel like we're with people, even though we can't be physically with people.
Judy is asking a question that is near and dear to my heart. Maybe some tricks on how you summarize what you learn without saying, I realized, I became aware, I knew. Yes. I think I did it myself, and then I realized, it's a formula if you use the 5 points, and one of that points is, what did I realize? So it's about finding almost any other way to say it, whether it's moving forward, things were different, or from that point forward, it's finding any other way to say it and then I realized. So like getting some ideas in your head, it's almost like if it could be an exercise, what did you realize? And then just pull that phrase out of your lexicon.
Yeah, I think one thing is that that's a little more essential in performance than it is in the workplace. I think in the workplace, you can use those cliches a little bit more, because those kind of cliches are also part of everyday speech. Like we use those cliches when we're talking to one another because it's a shorthand. People get that. So it's kind of, you can be a little more comfortable with it in a like business communication setting. In a performance setting or in a public presentation, then it can feel a little clunky and a little bit, stiff. But one thing you can also do is like dissect the word realize. Go to thesaurus.com, type it in, and look at all of the other ways, because all of the other words for realize are not just other words for realize. They all have nuanced meanings of their own. So it will make you think about that moment differently as well. You'll think about what it's like to come by information and to come by a revelatory experience in a different way by looking at the different nuanced ways of expressing that idea.
Yeah. Sarah is saying, yeah, she's just sort of agreeing with us. She is saying in the University of Vailment office where alumni wouldn't pick up the phone before, and now sharing, staying on the phone for hours, sharing and telling stories. Correct. Yeah, that's what's going on right now. And we're hoping that after listening to us, you might do that a little bit better. I think there was a question on being concise, or maybe I'm imagining that. The way to be concise, we didn't have time to dig into everything. We paint pictures with our words when we want to pull people in, and we tell things in overview when we want to quickly get through them. To be concise, it's more overview, but the key is understanding. It's when you put some pictures with your words that you grab your audience. So it's a longer you have, the more paintings of pictures you can do. The less time you have, the more an overview. Who here wants to hear Brad tell his story?
Oh, all right. Well, okay, we have 5 minutes. I'll see if I can squeeze this into 5 minutes.
Okay. So before you do, I just want to paste something here. If you are interested in more, go to thestorystudio.org and we'll email you all with this. If you've attended this webinar and you're interested in something else, you can get 20% off a corporate workshop and 15% off our live online group workshops.
Yeah.
Hold on.
You put that in the chat function already?
I am attempting to. I think I did.
You did, yes.
I did it twice. I'm sorry. What happened there?
Well, it's there. It's just kind of formatted strangely. I think the formatting on a Word document does not translate into the formatting on the chat.
We'll send it all to you, but it's just get in touch with us. But it's 20% off a corporate webinar, customized. We have open workshops. Go to, thestorystudio.org, and I'm leading 2, one in May, one in June, coming up soon on the weekends. There you go, Brad.
Okay, I will tell a story.
Story.
This is going to run us past our hour-long limit on the webinar. So if anyone has to leave right at 2 o'clock,
we won't
I will not be offended. But I'll go ahead and tell you this story. Okay, when I first came to New York, it was not to be a storytelling instructor. I first came to New York to be an actor. And when someone says they came to New York to be an actor, what they actually mean is they came to New York to work a series of brutal, low-paying jobs for virtually no money whatsoever. And so that was what I did. And one of the first brutal, low-paying, rent-paying jobs that I got was as a mover. And being a mover in New York City, what that means is it means being the middle guy on a 5-floor walk-up. It is 110 degrees outside and 120 degrees in the unair-conditioned, unventilated stairwell because everyone moves in the summertime. And you hike up and down 3 flights of stairs with 60-pound boxes, sweating out all the moisture in your body and mainlining Gatorade. And you can coming yay close to death. But I weirdly loved this job because It was very physical. I got to go out and see the city, see my new home, and I got to go and meet a lot of people. But also, you will never climb a company ladder faster than if you can show up to a moving job in New York City relatively on time and relatively sober. It is such, those are such rare skills in the field. And so very quickly, I was made a foreman with my own crew. Now, the company I worked for, when you were made a foreman, they took you aside into this little room and gave you a little talk. And the little talk went like this. Psychologists have found that moving is the third most traumatic thing that every adult will have to do routinely in their lifetime. The first is the loss of a loved one. The second is the breakup of a relationship. And the third is moving, because it's just very disconcerting to have your entire life dismantled and hauled out the door by strangers. So then the moral of this story was moving is emotionally difficult. The client is in an emotionally difficult place, even in a good move, so handle them with care. And so, with that in my back pocket, I went out to foreman my moves. And I was always kind of thinking about this when I was interacting with the clients, kind of thinking about like, you know, where were they emotionally, kind of looking at them, watching them out the side of my eye. But generally speaking, things were fine. For the most part, the social contract abides and people kept their head together and it was okay. But then one day, I get a work order taking a guy from the village to Williamsburg. And I show up, my guys arrive, the truck gets there, I ring the buzzer, the guy buzzes into the building. We go up to the third floor, we get there, and the door is hanging open waiting for us. I push open the door, and it is immediately obvious we are on the bad side of a breakup because there is virtually no large furniture in this place at all. All there is like a bookshelf and a couch and a table, and then everything else is in a series of backpacks and black garbage bags. And then you scan all of that and you get to the client, who is standing in the corner, head drooped, staring at the floor, just the saddest hipster you've ever seen in your entire life. He looks like he is hung from a hook. He looks like he is haunting the place rather than living in it, right? And he barely acknowledges us when we walk in, and I'm like, okay. So I give my guys their assignments. These are hauling stuff down, and I'm there trying to sort of like deal with the client. My job is to, you know, partly to like wrap the large furniture, but also to make small talk and make them comfortable. And I immediately screw it up because I throw a blanket over his table. I'm taping on the large table, and the small talk I choose is, "So, are you gonna miss the neighborhood?" At which point, this tiny voice from behind me says, "No, I never liked this neighborhood. My girlfriend wanted to live here, and that's over." Silence. Just the sound of the tape coming off the roll as this guy looms behind me like a great gray cloud of despair. And I've got to find something to say to this guy to make this better. And so I just start talking, saying the first thing that comes into my mind. And I say, well, yeah, you know, when I first moved to New York, I came here with a girlfriend, and she was going to Columbia Law. We lived up there near Columbia, and I didn't really like that neighborhood because it was, you know, a college area with college kids, and I wasn't going to college. But then, you know, after a year, we broke up, and I ended up moving to Brooklyn. When I got to Brooklyn, you know, I kind of found my people. I found my bar. I made friends. My roommate was great. And New York really felt like a home for me after that. Silence. Tape coming off the roll. And then this tiny voice from behind me says, "So it gets better?" And I said, "Yeah, man, it really does." This changed everything. Suddenly, this guy came completely out of his shell. He could not wait to get out of his apartment. He wanted to help us carry things down to the truck, which he was paying us to do. We get him down to the truck. Then he wants to ride in the truck to his new apartment. We let him. We put him in the middle seat, drove him over the bridge, got him to his new place in Williamsburg. He could not wait to show us this place. He's taking us through, like, showing us every little detail and appointment, yada, yada, yada. And he's like giving my guys snacks and beer, including the guy who was driving the truck, which I had qualms about. But at the end, he walks us out and waves to us as we drive away. Big smile on his face, right? Because I'd given the guy something I didn't even really realize he needed. I gave him hope. I told him a story from my own life, and it gave him hope. That was it. And that day, what came to me from that, what I kept from that, was that I had thought of that moving job as a meaningless job. But no job is meaningless if it allows you to help someone else to improve their life in some way. That's my story. And that's how we're going to finish this thing, I think. Is that right?
That is it. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you all. You're getting bravo and yay.
All right, good.
All right, y'all. So we have your emails. We will be sending you a little bit of a follow-up with our contact information, information about upcoming open workshops. Again, if you mention that you were part of this free webinar, you get 20% off on a corporate workshop, which are customized, or a 15% off on one of our open workshops. We're two business workshops that I will be teaching, one in a couple of weeks in May and one coming up in June. All of that will be on there. We'll also send you a story map. Stay well, stay safe. We're going to be doing some some more free webinars. And we have all your emails, so we will certainly get in touch with you on what those are at.
Again, thank you guys so much for being here. We really appreciate it, and we hope to see you all either in one of these virtual environments or in real life sooner or later. Thank you guys so much.